Drum Room. This is episode 61. And today I'm doing part 3 of my series, Remembering Charlie Watts. And what a great group of guests I have today with me. This is exciting. We've been trying to put this together for some time. And I'm very, very happy to tell you that today with me, I have Jim Keltner, Vinnie Colaiuta, Pete Thomas. See how I asked that? Vinnie Colaiuta, Pete Thomas, Anton Fig, and Aaron Comis. And they're all in the green room right now. It's very exciting. So as I say, this is, if you haven't seen the other 2 segments, I encourage you to please watch them, parts 1 and 2 of Remembering Charlie Watts, with a great assortment of guests on each show. And thanks to everybody who's been watching all along. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, to my podcasts, and for continuing to watch and support. So this is really great. I'm so glad to have these guys. We're not doing this live today. We're doing this taped so that I can protect the innocent or protect the guilty, as it were. So I guess without further ado, the natives are getting a little restless. So I'm going to let them all into the room. All right. And gentlemen, welcome. And I'm going to introduce you all one by one. And there's Jim Keltner.
Hi.
Aaron Comis.
Hey.
Anton Fig. Vinnie Colaiuta. And I don't know where Pete Thomas went. He's disappeared.
He's bailed.
Well,
No.
Who's going to set the tone? Who's going to set the tone? Is it going to be serious or funny? Pete.
There's Pete Thomas. Okay. Pete wanted to have a grand entrance, and I can't fault him for that, right?
I had to go and get my daughter because she's a drummer as well.
Yes,
so
yeah.
She's just, there she is. She's just listening in.
Oh, this is great. Thank you guys so much for being here today. Vinnie, to answer your question, it's going to be fun. We're just going to, we're going to be very fun and probably borderline silly. So the way I've done these in the past is I've just kind of had my guests talk about Charlie, tell a story or 2 or 3. And, in fact, Vinnie, let's start with you, because I saw you posted something on Instagram not long ago, a pair of Charlie's sticks that he gave to you at a Herbie Hancock show.
Almost.
Okay.
It wasn't at a Herbie Hancock show, but I of all of us probably have the least amount of Charlie stories, but just going with the sticks. Actually, I'll go backwards and just a little backstory is that I actually met Charlie. The first time I had met him was at a Stones rehearsal. Rehearsrsing. And we're not going to open that one up, right? Or maybe later. No. Okay. So I actually had the privilege to be invited to a Stones rehearsal through a friend of mine who was the one of the crew members, and that I was working with as well. So went to the rehearsal, and and I met Charlie. Said hello to everybody, and he just the greatest gentleman that you could ever want to meet. He's just a true gentleman, And so we were just talking and blah blah blah, and small talk, and that was it. And then so I went to a Stone show. I mean, I'd seen them several times live, but then after I met Charlie, I went to they had a show in San Diego at Petco Arena, and it was amazing because I mean, just going to the show, getting closer and closer to the arena, and as you're approaching the show, was more and more, it became like the whole town was the town of township of Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
You know, it was like, it reminded me almost on a level of going to a Dead show, you know, where it's, there's caravans blocking the highway for miles before you get to the gig. So, so it went, and the show was amazing. And, you know, the front of house, engineer did an incredible job on how Charlie sounded. I mean, you know, Charlie was so relaxed when he played. He was very, very relaxed. But because of the touch that he had, he was able to make his drums sound huge, as well as the front of house engineer. But you know, it takes two to tango. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, it has to do with the touch and the drums and the way you play them, as well as the person who's amplifying them. So, but anyway, what happened was, you know, after that show, I was going to go and meet Charlie, and then Charlie got sidetracked with something, and then they had to leave. And so Charlie's tech came out and was telling me that he felt so bad that he didn't get a chance to say hi to me, that he brought me a pair of his sticks.
Oh,
And I think it was the sticks that he used on the gig. In fact, I'm almost positive they were, and they were, you know, kind of beat up. And so I still have them, obviously, and I treasure them. And I have a pair of Ringo sticks as well. I'm going to just go a little tangential to Ringo here, which, you know, I was, so those two guys, right, are really, really central to a huge explosive kind of cataclysmic change that happened in pop music that influenced so many of us. And I'll take the liberty to speak for all of us, you know, if you don't mind. And I'm sorry if I'm rambling too much, but this is kind of all I got. So I'm just going to let it go, put a quarter in me. So, you know, so just let me have it for a few minutes, gentlemen, because it's all I got. So you know, so I got a pair of Ringo sticks, and what had happened was, those sticks, I got a chance to, you know, Jim was talking about, and I'm sure he'll tell us what a good friend he is of Ringo's, which is a huge privilege, obviously, mutually. So, when I was on tour a few years back in Europe with Jeff Beck, we played a gig in Amsterdam at a festival. It just so happens that Ringo was playing there, and so they, you know, Greg, you know, Bissonette and Lukather, they were all on the band. And so they found me and they were saying, oh, you know, you got to come and sit in on the last tune. You got to come and sit in. And I'm like, oh, come on, man. You know, I nah. So no, you got to do it. So we were going to leave. And so I was texting, I don't know if it was Luke or Greg. Anyway, I was texting and saying, we're leaving, man. You know, the bus is going. And so I'm sorry. What happened? We couldn't go because the bus driver lost the keys. He lost the keys to the bus, so we were stuck. So, yeah, happy accident, right? So it turns out I go and they call me up on the stage, and a little help from my friends. So Ringo gets up and goes in the front. They drag me in. I sit on Ringo's drums, and there's Biss next to me. And I'm playing, and Ringo's singing, and I'm freaking out. I'm thinking, this is not happening. It is happening. I'm playing Ringo's drums, playing a little help from my friends, give peace a chance. And it was the last, and they ran off, and it was like, here, take the sticks. So I took the sticks that were on the drums that Ringo left up there. And so I have those too that I actually used after he used them, that I got to sit in with. And it was like one of the highlights of my life. I mean, my hair on my arms is standing up on end, just thinking about that, you know, that experience. So, you know, the only thing that has to do with Charlie is the fact that I have Charlie sticks as well, but I didn't use them. He just gave them to me, and they were, you know, and so those two pairs of sticks occupy a place in a very safe zone in my house, and a very special place in my heart, as you can imagine. So Charlie, being the gentleman that he was, said, please give him these sticks.
Oh,
And it
man.
was just the most beautiful gesture that, that anybody could have done. And so it's just like, what a gentleman, wow. And he loved jazz music, and he was, a jazz drummer. And it's amazing to see how many of those guys came from that sensibility, but you can certainly tell in their playing. And so
That's
God bless
great.
Charlie Watts, man. And and I'm honored to have had those interactions with him,
Yeah.
while he was here.
Yep. That's
So that's
awesome.
my
Jim.
Charlie stories,
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, you only have to meet him one time to feel what you felt,
Yeah.
that presence that he had, that gentleman, like sincere, just warmth, that just exuded from him.
Amazing.
Yeah. Amazing.
I find that the greatest and the most influential, I mean, Elvin was like that. Elvin was just like a, like a Buddha,
Yeah.
he was just a heart of gold. So, and Charlie, they're all like that,
Yeah. Yeah. Amen. Who wants to,
Well, Charlie said that he had I think he has Elvin's green emerald kit, the Gretsch kit.
Oh, he's got a bunch, Anton.
Yeah.
Over at Maxwell's in New York, right? Have you been up there where you've seen all those drums that are up there? Like Elvin's yellow drums, and I think Morello's drums, and there's a bunch of kits up there that are of renown. Rumor has had it that they may have been Charlie's that were just on display there as a museum. That Charlie, I think, procured those drums.
He definitely said that he told me that he had the green set for sure. So I know that one. But I think the first time I met him, I think or one of the first times was John with you. We went down to the Blue Note. He was doing his jazz gig.
Yes.
And the funny thing with that was he came in all impeccably dressed, and that's it. Was from there, and he walked in and he had this beautiful overcoat on, and he was just like very well dressed and wonderful, and the gentleman that everyone knows him to be, and then he kind of like looked at us, or felt like he looked at me. He took the coat off and he just let it drop off on the floor, and it just fell on the floor. And he kind of looked at me again and then just walked away. And it was like as if he was saying, like, this is all really nice, but it really means nothing. It's just a material thing. I was kind of sort of touched by that humanity of him. And then he went and he played I saw the first set. And it was beautiful. He was such a lovely person. And when you said how relaxed he was, I mean, I'm sure Jim has had an opportunity to see that up real close a lot. But he had that kind of, for me, he had that sort of swinging thing that the old rock and roll drummers had, and yet it was a very taut backbeat at the same time. So he held it on a short leash. And it was tight, but it was very swinging and very relaxed. And I think that was like the real beauty in his playing. He never beat anyone over the head, but it was so beautifully in time, and he held the band together.
Pete
That's
and I
what
were
it was
just,
for me.
Well said.
we were talking about that when we were off the air, Pete Thomas and I, and I was just, Anton, I was going to say, I remember when I maybe I introduced you guys, I thought you knew him before that, but I remember he knew you as being Blondie Chaplin's friend too. He said, because Blondie was in the band at the time, and I think he introduced, there was somebody else there that he said, this is Anton, he's Blondie's mate, so you were, in his eyes, I think, you were a good guy because you knew Blondie, and so it was, and I think every time after that, when he'd do something in New York, like the premieres, he'd ask me to get a hold of you, or he'd call you himself maybe to invite you,
Yeah, it was always a thrill to get, like, sometimes he would call up and I would see on the call answering thing, it would say Rolling Stones, so I knew it was his official phone, and it was a major thrill to get one of those.
Yeah. Funny. I know. Well.
Yeah, I've kept every one of his messages.
Oh man.
I have a file for them.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, Jim, you mentioned earlier, while we were off the air that you met Charley 50 years ago, 70 or 71?
Yeah, 71.
71. Maybe you could talk about that first time you met him and any stories you want
I
to.
wish I could. I wish I could remember the time I met him, but 1971 is barely miraculous that I can even remember 71 at all. I'm way older than all you guys, so 1971.
I remember it. I confess.
And, yeah, yeah. Well,
Go ahead, Jim.
it was. I was in England, and I'm not even sure what it was, but it was something great, And I was just my head was in the clouds in those days, and Charley right away wanted to talk about jazz, and he wanted to talk about Elvin, and I told him, Elvin was my biggest influence after, we had this whole conversation, and and we all feel the same. Basically, we're all jazz guys, basically deep in our soul. But that was the bonding that I had with Charley, and then those other guys would always be coming around and messing things up. But all these things that Vinnie was saying and Anton was saying about Charley being a gentleman, that's the biggest part that you remember about this guy. He was, first of all, he was everything about him was classic. Cynthia just asked me a minute ago. She said, "Well, who is this? What?" And I said, "It's John DeChristopher. John is the Zildjian guy, or used to be the Zildjian guy. I'm not sure what the situation is."
Not anymore, yeah.
And I said, and Charley was a Zildjian guy. Everything about Charley Watts was classic. Everything about him, the way he, the overcoats that he wore, I found out just recently, because it never really mattered to me in those days, but I found out just recently that he had all of his clothes tailor-made. You start to make a little money, and what do you do? What do you spend it on? Cars or this or that or whatever? With him, it was clothes. He would go to what's the place on Savile Row? The tailors there on Savile Row.
Yeah.
When I was at Apple, I used to we'd go by it, and I'd always say to myself, "I'm going to go get a suit at Savile Row." I never did, unfortunately, but Charley had most of his stuff done by the tailors there, and so that's why he always looked immaculate. It just everything about Charley Watts was like classy, and his love for jazz. And then you'd see him playing with this band of scruffy cats, that played out of tune, and on purpose. The Rolling Stones, they would not sound right if it was like perfect.
Yeah. Right. There you go.
But Charley was the engine, was more than the engine. He was, and Keith and all of them have always said that, and especially now they say it because they know. I mean, he was the soul. He was the heart and soul of the Rolling Stones, and they fought mightily to keep him in that band. He was going to leave many times,
Mm-hmm.
and he thought, I'm just telling you all the stuff that you already know, that he thought the band was never going to be anything, that was never going to make it, which is hilarious. But I don't know. I wish I had like actual Charley Watts stories, but I just don't. I don't know if any of you guys have got personal stories. Go ahead, because all I can tell you is that I loved this guy, and he really, really liked me. He liked being around me, and that always blew my mind.
He loved you, man. He absolutely loved you.
I know, and I always would tell him, that I would love to have been able to consider myself a jazz player, but I respect the art form too much to even be able to say that about myself. I love jazz, that's all, and it was my hugest influence, but I never would consider myself a jazz musician. And he always liked that. He understood what I was saying.
Yeah. Well,
but,
can I
yeah.
just tell, I want you guys to tell stories, but I have a story that can sort of pivot off of what you just said, Jim, about Charlie and his clothes. This was about 13 years ago. The year was 2008. I told this story in one of the other one of these shows that I did, but I'm going to tell it here because it's right in line with what you're talking about. I had lunch with him in London with him and Sherry Daly, who I know you remember, Sherry, from The Office. And we had lunch at this great little place in Chelsea, right near where his flat was. I was there for a few days ahead of the Frankfurt show. And so it's a beautiful like spring day, and we finished lunch, and he said, it's like a Friday afternoon. He said, so what do you have to do now? Where do you have to go? I said, I'm free. I don't have anything to do. I'm staying up on Regent Street. I'm going to just probably go do a little shopping on Regent Street. He said, well, I've got to run up to Piccadilly to run some errands. Do you want to come with me? And I said, sure, I'd love to. So we take a walk over to his flat, which is around the corner. He picked up a few things. Then we walked up along Hyde Park up to Piccadilly. And the first stop, my wife remembers this better than me, and she wasn't even there, but the first stop was at I believe his shoemaker, the person that makes his shoes for him. And he goes in and he's there to try on a pair of shoes that his shoemaker had made for him. And this is the funniest part, is he's introducing me to this man that owns this shop as a very important man in the music business. He said, he knows all the drummers. He knows Roy Haynes. He knows Elvin Jones. He knows all these guys. And when they need something, they call him. And so the guy's looking at me like impressed, going, great, nice to meet you. And I'm going, yeah, but you're Charlie Watts, So we finish he tries his shoes on. We go on to the next stop, which was his shirt maker. And it was the Burlington Arcade. And they were the two different, right up on Bond Street, where you're talking about Savile Row, and there were two different arcades up that way where he shopped. And so we go to the shirt maker, and it's the same thing. He goes in and I think he tried a shirt on, and then he had a couple others there, like in a box ready to go. And he said, you can send these, but I'll take this one with me or something. And again, introduces me to the man there as a very important man in the music business. It was, I thought he was taking the piss out of me, but he was being very serious. And it was a day I'll never forget. So we were on our way there. As we were walking, he points to this beautiful restaurant my wife and I go to all the time. And Pete, you might know this place called the Woolsey. It's right on Piccadilly. Oh,
Great
Charley
place.
Drayton's going to, yeah, you know it, Vinnie. The
Oh,
Woolsey,
yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I'm going to let Charley Drayton in and pause this for 1 second. And here he comes, here he comes, here he comes.
Charlie.
Wow, what a nice. And well, anyway, so we'd passed by the Woolsey, and he'd mentioned his daughter was going to have her 40th birthday party in a couple of months there, and how great a restaurant it is. So we finished doing what we're doing. It's about 4 p.m. And he says, where do you have to go now? And I said, I'm don't have to go anywhere. He said, how about getting a coffee somewhere? Charlie, welcome.
Friends, teachers, hello.
Hey, Charlie.
It's
Charlie.
great to see you,
How are you,
Charlie.
man?
Oh, man.
My
So glad you
cyber
could-
algorithm is somewhere, and it might fade or it might stay in rhythm with us. Hello, everybody.
Oh,
It's a
Hey,
drum-
thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining. I'm going to just take one more second, Charlie, and finish this
I don't
story
mean
that
to
I'm telling these guys. No, it's okay. I'll wrap it up. But basically, he said, how about a coffee? And we look up and there's a Starbucks just up the road a little ways. And we went, no, we don't want to go to Starbucks. He said, how about tea at the Woolsey? So we walk on over. It's a couple of blocks down. go up to the hostess, and the place is packed. It's just like there's people at the bar drinking martinis, and it's rocking and rolling. So Charley says, 2 for tea. And this young girl at the counter said it's about a 30-minute wait. So we sort of looked at each other and said, well, yeah, okay, not going to happen. So we start to walk out. A man comes out of nowhere, grabs both of us by our shoulders and says, right this way. And, it's like the scene in Goodfellas where this table sort of appears out of nowhere, like, and Charley turns to me and said, they must know who you are.
Yeah,
That was worth the punchline. That was worth the wait.
Yeah. Well, good. Thanks. And so we had
good
this
one.
wonderful, afternoon tea at the Woolsey, and it was a day I'll never forget. Charley, I've probably told you that story 100 times, but anyway, it's good to see you, my friend. Oh,
good.
Good to see
Yeah.
you. Good to
Where's
see you.
Charley Drayton?
Huh?
Where's Charley Drayton? Oh, there you are.
Charley, where are you, Charley?
Jimmy Lee, I am in Philadelphia today,
Awesome.
and it's wonderful to be back here. This is my first arrival here since, this whole new rhythm we're trying to figure out and live within and be amongst each other. And
yeah.
so today, I have an opportunity to serve a few songs, and I'm just happy to be here with everybody for a few minutes.
Thank you
Fantastic.
for being here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
Well,
Why isn't he up on the thing up there?
I think, Jim, if you go up to your view up on the top right corner of your screen and you see where it says view,
Yeah.
click on gallery. Does it give you the option to click on gallery?
No, it just says show managed participants, show chat. Oh, show managed participants? Is that it?
But you do see a button that says view, it looks like a tic-tac-toe board, like 9 little dots next to the word view.
Jimmy, you look much better on the screen than I do.
If you click on gallery, I think you'll see all of us.
Oh, well, no, don't. Oh, gallery view. Okay.
Yes, try that. See if that.
Man, it froze.
Oh, there we are.
There we are. Good.
Oh, I shouldn't have done that.
Charley's it's worth it to see Charley Drayton.
Yeah. But why isn't Charley still there?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
He's up there.
He's there. But I think he's frozen.
He might have froze.
He might have froze. Well, while Charley unfreezes, Aaron, I know you guys, the Spin Doctors, toured with the Stones in '94.
Yes, we had the good fortune of doing the Voodoo Lounge tour. We did about 15 shows with them. And before I talk about Charley, I just want to say, thanks for having me. It's a big honor to be here with all you guys. Every single one of you has been a really big influence on me. And it's, I've known John for 30 plus years, and he still calls me the new guy. So I'm not so new anymore, but seriously, really, man, everybody here, it's kind of wild for me to see you all in these little squares, so cheers.
Good
Thanks
to see you, Aaron.
Hollywood Squares, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. I mean, I've always been a huge admirer of Charley's drumming and a big Stones fan, and a real lover of drummers and bands. When I grew up, like all of us, I came from a jazz background, but I've always sort of been equally into jazz and, rock and roll bands, and also all my favorite studio musicians. When I moved to New York in '88, I came here, I really wanted to be a jazz drummer, a studio drummer, and a guy in a band, and I've kind of been able to some degree do all of them, but, most of them known for being in the Spin Doctors. And in 1990, I guess it was 94, 95, we were asked to do the Voodoo Lounge tour. And, it was a really great thing. And, got to hang with Charley some. And, like everybody said here, he's just such a classy guy, such a gentleman. He made me feel really comfortable from the get-go. He seemed to be the most accessible out of all the guys. He was out there wandering around a lot, playing snooker or whatever. And we'd have little chit chats, and, at the time I really tried to be respectful. It was an honor to be on that tour. I didn't want to be in anybody's face. So I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, God, there's so many things I wish I would have sort of asked him when I had the opportunity, but it was more just a little bit of talk about music and both of our loves for jazz drumming and everything. But the thing I remember is just how nice of a guy he was, how comfortable he made me feel, what a classy guy was. I'll never forget, we were doing some shows with them in South America and bumping into him in the lobby on the day off. And he's dressed, he's wearing one of his killer suits. I'm like, hey man, how's it going? Hey, what are you up to, Charlie? He's like, oh, I'm going shopping. So he was going shopping. And he looked amazing. And, I watched every show every night. And, Charlie really is the glue in that band. I mean, he was so consistent night after night. And Vinnie touched on it earlier, just the sound he gets out of the drums, that light touch mixed with the phenomenal job they do with the front of house. He really was able to create this style of, really just a beautiful touch. But out on the front, it sounded massive, And I thought about, I don't know if he thought about it early on in his career, but he really was smart in the way he developed his style. He probably would have never guessed he was going to be still playing stadiums all the way up till 80 years old. But that's pretty smart thinking ahead, because I think particularly a lot of rock drummers and bands, you might dig yourself in a hole on your first couple records when you're 20, and it's hard to play that way when you get a lot older. So Charlie was very smart. I don't know if that was purposeful or not, but he's a great example of just how to get a beautiful sound out of the drums without wailing into them, which I'm a big fan of. I think it's not that there's anything wrong with hitting hard. There's some amazing drummers that do that, but the sound you can get out of drums with that light touch and that sort of that release he gets. I guess it's a lot of that jazz touch he has. I always feel like he's coming off the drum as opposed to sort of digging into it. Yeah. And it's just that snap he gets, And so getting to watch him every night, and as we know, the Stones are not the tightest band every night. The guitars can be, as they say, they weave, and it's one of the most beautiful things. Yeah. But if they didn't have a guy like Charlie holding that together night after night, it could be a train wreck. And he really did. And the other thing that I loved, and I'm sure all you guys have probably noticed this, at a Stones show, is when Mick would announce the band, he'd go through the band and he'd say Keith, and everybody do their Keith thing, and Keith did his thing, and then Charlie every night got the biggest reaction. It was just unbelievable every night, and he'd stand up, and and it was just like, and it went on and on and on. I just thought that was so cool, to see that kind of a reaction to him at those live shows. So I wish I had more stories. I wish I would have been a little more, I wish I would have asked him more questions when I had the opportunity. But like I said, I really was trying to, it was an honor to be on that tour, and I was really trying to be respectful of him and just to be there. But man, what an inspiration. I had a question actually for you, Jim, because I've heard, everybody knows Charlie does that thing where he comes off the snare drum, which I love, and I love the sound it makes. When you hit I know that he probably does it to so that he doesn't crisscross, but I also just love the way the drum sounds when it's hit by itself. You get this beautiful tone. But I had heard somewhere that that you saw Levon Helm do it, and then Charlie saw you do it, and that's where it came from. And I'm just wondering if you could maybe
that little story is that's right. I should have remembered that a minute ago. The thing is, when I met Levon, he changed my course, the course of my drumming, in a big way.
Yeah.
And we would sit and talk, and he would say, "God damn it, Jim Lee, I played all those damn little things that you played, man." And I said, "Oh, Levon, if I could just hit the floor tom and make it be in the right spot and sound the way you do, man." So we had that kind of relationship. And so he affected me deeply. And when I would see them play in the studio or live, he always did that. He always brought the hi-hat, hi-hat stick up off the backbeat. And so I don't remember actually trying to do it. It just infiltrated my playing, and then I started doing it. And so I didn't really start for any other reason other than just watching Levon do it. And then years later, Charley told me that he started doing it from seeing me on the Bangladesh film doing it. And I thought that was hilarious. And then Steve Jordan started doing it because he saw Charley doing it. And then ironically now, Steve Jordan is, his replacement. Now, I hate that word replacement, but he has the great honor of playing the gig. And I saw him not long ago, and he does it once in a while. He doesn't do it all the time, right? But that's the story that I heard. Jordan told me that. So
yeah, because I mean, when I think about just the few guys, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, well, I was just going to say, you were talking about the sound that he got out of his drums. This is another little funny story. Jordan told me, Steve and Charley Drayton and Steve Jordan and myself, we've always had this little bond. Back in the day, we hung out good and bad, and but Jordan is always, we're talking all the time on the phone, and he told me right when the rehearsal started, he said, I dipped my hand down in Charley's bag and I pulled out one of his sticks, and I was amazed at how big it was. Like, how does he play with these big sticks all night long, like these big concerts? And he said, I tried to do it for a few numbers, and it was hard to do for him, because Steve's sticks are those little hip Steve Jordan sticks. And so we started talking about it, and I think that the thing is that, first of all, I recall, I don't know of any of y'all who have met him and shook hands with him, whether you remember like I do. I don't have big hands, but Charley's hands were big on my hand. When I shook his hands, he had big soft hands, and in the same way that George Harrison did. And I'm saying that because these are not big guys, they weren't like big guys that you would think would have big hands. They were relatively small dudes, but they had sort of big soft hands. And I always remember that about Charley, and playing traditional with that big stick. He played it, like you said, Aaron. He played it. He approached the drums like a jazz guy did. He would never hit them hard. He didn't play like Tony,
Yeah.
He played kind of light. That's where he came from. And then when he hit the backbeat, he hit it right up in there in the fat part of the stick. And that's not unusual for all of us. We all do that from time to time. For myself, I got to play all over the freaking place. I want to play up on the neck, on the backbeat sometimes, and then down in the fat part sometimes. But he always stayed on the fat part. He never went anywhere else on the stick for his backbeat, and that was part of the beauty of and the consistency of his playing. And then the other thing is that when you were talking about the beauty of listening to him hold the band together, that was a thing that I used to talk to Charley about. I used to say to him, you figured this out early on, because, and I'm saying this as a person who's played with Keith, I had different opportunities to play with Keith Richards, you know, various different things. Where I unfortunately was always so loaded at that point, it was too bad. But even so, playing with Keith Richards, I could tell that it wouldn't be easy. What you wouldn't want to do is hold him down when he went away, or to push him if he would, you know, you can't do that with the Rolling Stones. You can't do that with those guys. So Charlie didn't do that. What he did do was he allowed in his playing, and if you listen this way, you'll hear it. He allowed for Keith Richards' guitar to be the hi-hat, to be an integral part of his drum set, and that's not natural for us as drummers. We want to play the hi-hat. That's the way we do. That's what we do. And but Charlie figured that out early on. The less hi-hat he played, the more Keith was free. And the more free Keith was, the more he paid attention to Charlie and not pushing around too much. And so it was this magical combination that made those grooves, man, those are iconic grooves that we hear on the radio to this day, and we will forever.
Yeah.
Wow. That's heavy stuff, Jim. I'm going to jump in here real quick, if you guys don't mind. I just want to tell you, Jim, that's what you just said in the last few minutes there was probably one of the greatest lessons I've ever got. So, well, just thanks for that. That was like a 3-minute masterclass. And for the drummers out there and musicians that might be watching that may have missed it, it speaks volumes in a general sense as well. And it was a great segue from, you know, in my opinion, from talking about and illustrating why Charlie did what he did with the hi-hat. And so it just kind of, that was a great extrapolation into a huge lesson, meaning that we're talking about what you should or shouldn't do. Playing with Keith, it's obviously, and I'm going to just sort of spell out things that might be obvious to some, but maybe not so obvious to others. That it speaks about a broader role that we have as musicians. That is a huge part of becoming a mature musician and someone who plays music, is to know that kind of stuff, and that happens when you're playing with other people live together. And so as good as people can become playing by themselves with a click or with a computer that doesn't talk back, and you know, you could reach a high level of skill doing that, obviously.
Yeah.
And I'm not here to demean that.
No.
But it's just, there's a whole other dimension of playing that informs us and into becoming what we become, that, you know, can stand the danger of being lost if that doesn't happen, because it's our interacting together. That's that kind of stuff. You can only get that if you're in that situation. And then it's sort of like, well, you're either going to figure that one out, or you're not going to figure it out. And people like Jim Keltner figured it out. And that's why he's the great Jim Keltner, because he figured that out, you know, and he saw that. No, I'm not blowing smoke, Jim. I'm just truth, bro. It's truth. This is just truth. # truth. And it's, you know what I'm saying? And that's a mighty lesson there, you know? And like, for me, like for example, what Aaron was talking about, right? Going back to Aaron, the touch, and what you also talked about, Jim, where he always played on the fat part of the stick, right? On the backbeat, get a certain kind of sound like that. Right. Mm-hmm. And so like, I would have never, you know, like how many of us left to our own resources would have said, okay, I'm going to jump in that gig and I'm going to play the gig, you know, using a flat ride, you know what I mean? And a little China. Yeah. You know, it's like, I would have never, I thought, no, I'm not going to play this gig on a flat ride, but he did, you know? Yeah. That was just one thing that he did. And so, yeah, that was a mighty lesson. And I just had to highlight what you said, Jim, because I wanted people to stop and think on that, not just so I could talk, but I wanted to put a pause on that, like somebody like, you know, putting a light bulb on a paragraph on a page for a while before they turn the page. You know, like pay attention, let that sink in, what he just said. Let that sink in, let that sink in, repeat and rinse. So I just wanted to say that.
You know, just
I could. Oh, I was going to say, I could endorse that story. Yeah, we did a gig with them in 2006 in Soldier Field in Chicago, and we were setting up during the sound check, and his drum tech was there, not Don, the guy before, and
Mike. Yeah.
Mike, yeah.
Yeah.
And I said to him, okay, so how does he do it? How does Charlie do it? Like what? Because he's just got those two wedges, you know, he's got his drums on a little carpet, you know, it's like no big deal. I said, so how does he do it? Like, what does he have in the monitors and stuff? And he just looked at me like sort of weird, you know, didn't look like he was going to be terribly helpful. And he went off, and I just thought, oh, well, you know, there you go, whatever. And then about an hour later, he came back and he said, I've had a word with Charlie. He wants you to come on stage and sit by him and watch the show. And, you know, I was like, what? You know, you're kidding me. And then I said, well, I've got my wife with me as well. And he said, that's okay. You can bring her up as well. He said, just wait till the show's started, then come round the back and we'll take you up on stage. So they started the show, you know, Jumping Jack Flash, and it's like that. I've never had that feeling anywhere else. Like when they start the show, ladies and gentlemen, the Rolling Stones, it's like, anyway, so we're standing there, me and my wife. It's snowing. It's like horizontal snow coming on the stage. And they're like such troopers. They're up there, you know. So this guy leads us up on stage. He sits my wife next to Keith Richards' amp, like behind, like that 4x10 or whatever, you know. Like her head is behind Keith Richards' amp. It's like being in the Vatican or something, you know. It's like this sacred, and I'm sitting there as well. And Charlie Watts looks over. He's got the red socks on, you know, and he just gives us this look like, you know, and I witnessed exactly what Jim is talking about. Like it was Keith and Charlie. Like I was in the middle of it.
That's the engine.
And I was doing okay. I was all right. I was like, I mean, I knew it was cool, but I was all right until Keith started Midnight Rambler, you know, until this amp that I could see went, and at that point I just melted, you know, and then Charlie comes in with that, you know, and he's just popping that snare like you say, you know, and I realized, like, with the Rolling Stones audience, no other audience dances like a Rolling Stones audience. Like most people are up and down. They're like, whoa, Bruce Springsteen, you know, like, but with the Rolling Stones audience, they're wiggling and squirming, and like everybody's like doing this. I mean, a bit like Mick, I suppose, and it's Charlie and Keith. It's that unbelievably unique thing, you know.
Yeah.
And he was so nice to invite me to do that, you know. I mean, I didn't know him real well. I met him a few times, but it's the same thing everybody's saying. He's so nice, you know, such a...
You know, one more last thing from me here on this, you know, Pete, what you just said is that's our story, Cynthia and me. We never saw in all the years that they came to LA to play the big stadiums and whatever, we never were out in the audience. He always had us back there with him.
Yeah.
And he loved being able to play. He's playing to 20, 30,000 people more or whatever. And he's playing and he'd look up almost like to see if we're still there. And I loved, you know, he would look up and I go, you know, I just would always go freaking out on him, you know, Charlie, you son of, and he just loved that we were loving being close to him, watching him play.
And he would make a face like when Keith Richards played a wrong chord, he'd turn around and do that.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know any of us here who would do that. I don't want people sitting around me while I'm playing the drums. How about you, Vinnie? Would you as many fans as you have would want to be close to you? Would you do that?
What I do.
I mean, invite somebody up to sit next to you while you were playing.
Probably not.
You know what I mean? I mean, just.
No, I mean, I've had it. I've had that many times, and we all have. I mean, geez, there. I mean, one you know, there have been so many clubs in LA around here that have, you know, we all know that have gone belly up. There was this one place on Ventura Boulevard in Sherman Oaks. I don't remember what the name of it was. I think it was called Le Cafe or something.
Oh yeah.
It was
Yeah.
really small, and I mean, I'm talking like, you know, if you had to be careful if you were gonna sort of hit your right crash because somebody's head was right there. It was that small and, you know, of a room, and you know, and playing loud too. It's like I feel bad for the people that were sitting next to the, you know, but no, I wouldn't want. I just.
It's you know, Charlie. It's just another one of those unusual things about Charlie Watts.
Well, yeah.
The unusual cat.
Exactly.
Really an unusual cat.
Yeah.
You know, going back to what you know, you're talking about the relationship, the hi-hat, and the thing you got to ask yourself. You know, a band like the Stones. I mean, they're so great to listen to. People love them, and you know, you have to ask yourself, well, why is it? What makes a band so good for so long? You know, and there's so many things. I mean, obviously, amazing songwriting, musicianship, Mick Jagger being the entertainer,
Yeah.
but these subtle things like you were talking about, Jim, you know, that are so interesting to the ear. A lot of people, most people don't even know why it is that they like it so much. But, you know, I always thought like, you know, Stones and the Beatles, I mean, two greatest rock and roll bands ever. I always thought that the Beatles more was like classical and the Stones more like jazz. You know, it's that interplay that they always have going on, both live and in the studio. You know, you hear it on those records. You know, Jim Dickinson told me a story. I did some work with him years ago, and he, you know, I believe he played on, was it Wild Horses, I think?
That's right.
And so he was hanging around a lot during that record. And what he told me was that, at least for that record, and I know they do think things are different from album to album, but on those particular sessions that he was at, he said that basically the first time they got a take from beginning to end without anybody making a major mistake, that was the take. That's what they would work with, you know? And, you know, very few bands can get away with that. I mean, somehow the Stones have been able to, and it's that spontaneity, all those happy accents throughout all those songs that is the magic that has become drilled in our brain. I mean, think of all the classic Charlie fills that, you know, I don't want to call them accidents, but they're like these random things, like the beginning of "Start Me Up," you know, as an example, or, you know, a lot of them, or the end of, I think it's "Can't You Hear Me Knocking," where he hits the crash. You know, I mean, you know, I don't know, but I'm guessing maybe he didn't know they were stopping. Who knows? Maybe he did it on purpose. It doesn't matter. It's these amazing classic things that make it so interesting years later. But most of all, that magic. And I just watched an interview with him recently. I think it was a pretty recent interview. And, you know, it's kind of what you were talking about, Pete, you know, like inviting you on the stage and this love he had for musicians and his own bandmates, and they were asking him about the bandmates, and they got to Mick Jagger, and it was almost like he had tears in his eyes. He basically said that Mick Jagger is the greatest thing out there, that Mick Jagger is the greatest entertainer alive. And, you know, think about it. I mean, we're all drummers. A lot of what we all do is backup singers, you know, and it's like, if you don't like the singer, you know, you might feel that. You know, sometimes tension works, but like he loved Mick Jagger, and like he had his back every night for 50 years, you know, and like they all had each other's back. But I just think, you know, it's that camaraderie and that love that a guy like Charley, you know, has that makes music, you know, special. And it certainly, you know, I mean, there's such a special band, and Charley was just such a huge part of that, you know.
You know,
Can I just add to that? Oh, go ahead, Jim. Sorry.
I'll make this quick. You know,
No.
The thing is, what knocks me out is that you have like a little panel here, and this is just us. This is just a little small group here.
Yeah.
All these other people, there's so many great musicians. There's so many great drummers in our community. We have, you know, Aaron and Vinnie and Anton, and, you know, though you three guys, I put me more because we're more like, you know, sort of in this area here, I put it in. But, you know, you guys are really, really advanced players. I mean, that's the way I see it. And you know, Dave, I'm good friends with Dave Weckl and what's his shit? I can start naming them off, you know, and the cats that play like they're from another planet. And that's the way I've always thought of Vinnie, for instance, you know. But to hear people like that, all of us joining together and talking about the appreciation we have for a band like the Rolling Stones, that knocks me out. That really gives me that actually solidifies what I've always thought anyway, about the real musicians, the cats that have the music in their hearts and their brains together. There's no distinction between, you know, what you would think, you know, like
Right.
Charley. Listen, I mean, Charley, and I say this with all the love I can muster up and for Charlie Watts, who I did really truly love. Charley could barely play a roll. I never saw him play a roll, and when he did, it wasn't proper, you know, and he never felt like he needed to, so he didn't, and he didn't advance his playing to any degree, which I'm sure he could have, but I think Vinnie or somebody said a minute ago, you know, why would you, you know, he found these guys early on in life, and they found him, and they made this thing happen, and he didn't feel the need, you know, to go any further. But what I'm trying to say is, for a guy who played really, really what you might consider to be limited technique, he had the most unusual, like you said a minute, somebody said about the fills and things. You can listen to a song by the Rolling Stones and you'll go, wow, I gotta do that sometime. I gotta try to put that in my vocabulary.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
Man, it's masterclass Jim Keltner, man. This is some deep. This is deep, man. I'm telling you, man, it really is, Jim. You're blowing my mind, man. Like you always do. We feel the same way about you, you know. And like you're from another planet. Like nobody can think and come up with the stuff that you do. But see, that's the thing, man. Too, what you're talking about is like championing individual identity. There's a lot to unpack in here. You know, the whole thing of just being yourself. That's what Charley was. He was himself. Right. And the idea of talking about, well, the Stones, you know, they play sloppy but the symbiosis they had, you couldn't get that kind of funk. I've heard so many multi-tracks of records that I just grew up on that I love, that still to this day, none more funky. But if you listen and you start picking apart all these little parts, you go, man, how'd they let that track get on there? You know, it sounds, you know, but it's not horrible. It wouldn't have sounded better had they cleaned it up. Number three, like, I mean, you know, for all the things that, like, how many people could sound like Charlie did in the Stones? Like, nobody, man. To me, it's like, I mean, you know, it's there's only one Charlie Watts. And the other thing is I mean, this is well, I don't know, I don't want to ramble too much, but it's, you really said a mouthful once again. You know, I'm starting to ramble and go off my train of thought here, but I think that you know, that kind of synergy is, like, you talk about, oh, he couldn't even play a role. You're saying that with respect, but it's kind of like, can you imagine somebody trying to, like, you talk about how I play or how Dave plays or how so-and-so plays, this person, that person. But like, if you had the cleanest, most sophisticated modern drum corps chops in the world, okay, which is, I mean, there's some serious technique going on out there, right?
Right.
Okay. Is that going to make you sound like Elvin Jones? Like, can you imagine if Elvin had chops like that and he focused on that? You couldn't play that kind of sensibility in order to want to play that way. Doesn't serve that concept at all. It's so far removed from trying to execute that concept and make that kind of musical statement. You could never sound like that ever if you tried to approach it from that perspective. You just couldn't do it. You know what I mean? So it's
Absolutely.
like, so really at the end of the day, you know, you have to kind of go, well, who cares? What's better, quote unquote, better? You know what I mean? Well, what are you trying to say? You know, what tool are you bringing to the gig? You know, and so Charlie, and even, I mean, I had the great pleasure of interviewing John McLaughlin recently, who said that he needed, you know, structure, or what some people might call limits, in order to be free. So it's kind of like, are you really limited, or is that just the way you're looking at it? You know, I don't know. I think Charlie was just Charlie. He was just himself, you know, and that's,
Well,
I mean, honestly, I'm taking all of this, extracting it again out of 3 minutes of just infinite wisdom coming from Jim Keltner. So thanks for that, man. You know, that's amazing.
Well, I just want to add to what you're saying, Vinny, what Jim said, and Aaron, and that is, I think what you just said is exactly right, Vinny, and you could almost sum it up by saying he was so comfortable in his own skin that he, like, and this goes to a point that Pete made also, like a song like Midnight Rambler, where it was the one part of the night where the Stones really jammed, you know, for 10 minutes. It was never played the same way every time. And some nights they really take it to a place, and then other nights they might keep it a little more kind of on earth. But I think if Charlie didn't feel comfortable in his own skin, he probably wouldn't have taken the chances that he took playing that song. I mean, I have like countless recordings of bootlegs of that particular song, for example, on, you know, different records. And some nights he's going for shit that like that Elvin would go for, you know what I mean? Like he's
right.
stretching, and I know he was channeling guys like Elvin or Tony. Like he had to be hearing in his mind, what would Elvin play? How would he do this? You know, and you'd hear almost, you know, bits of like polyrhythms and things that he was his own version of it, you know. And I encourage you guys, really, if you can get a hold of some of these bootlegs, it's some pretty spectacular stuff from like the 70s when he was really, really stretching. The band was really stretching. And I think he had to be comfortable to be able to do that. And I'll just say one more thing. A couple of times I saw him in New York. Roy Haynes was in the audience, and he sort of assigned me to make sure that Roy was looked after. You know, can you make sure Roy gets to his seat? One time, Anton, when we all went to the premiere, I think it was about 8 years ago at the Ziegfeld Theater for the premiere for Crossfire Hurricane, and he asked me to go out. He said, "Can you make sure Roy and Anton get in and make sure they get their tickets?" And I remember meeting you out front, Anton. I think you were still doing the Letterman show. and you met me, like came right from there and met me out front, and we went up and saw Charlie. But he was always thinking like that. Like here he is, you know, either at a gig or at a big premiere, and he's thinking like, can you just make sure Roy Haynes gets in? Can you just make
Yeah, you know, I remember that night at the party afterwards, I was talking to Keith and I said, oh, Charlie sounds so fantastic. And he goes, yeah, he's our secret weapon.
yeah.
And, you know, but there was, when they did that pay-per-view show in New Jersey, I went and I was me and Laura, my wife, and my son, Aaron, and we were in Charlie's room talking, and a lot of it was jazz and you know, talking about all the jazz drummers and how they sounded, what they did. Now, after a while, he said, you know, you want to go to Keith's room for a bit? So he took me over there, took us all over there, and we hung there for a bit. Then he took us back. It was getting close to showtime. And I said, you know, don't you want to be on your own, you know, get ready for the show? He goes, no, stay. You must stay. And he just kind of kept us there, like all the way up to showtime. At one point, he said to me, you know, I'm nervous. And I go, why? You know, it's another show. He goes, well, it's a live pay-per-view. And I go, oh, well, it's going to be the same. You're just in a big hall, exactly the same. But I just was like so touched that he said that to me, that he like revealed himself and wasn't afraid to be vulnerable about it. It really, really meant a lot to me. And of course, when he played absolutely fine. You know, he was totally fine. But it was so memorable to me to have that kind of close interaction.
Well, I want to go to Pete for 1 second, but I just want to say the party after the premiere that you were talking about at that hotel way downtown. We went there and they had this great, Roy Haynes came to it and we were hanging out. And I'll just tell all you guys, this is great. Anton at one point says, it's probably like midnight. Anton says, well, I'm going to go, I'm tired. I'm going to go home. And I look over about 20 minutes later and he's in Keith's private booth for like another hour.
Okay.
I just got a kick out of it. Like, oh, well, of course you're not going to leave. There's Keith, and he's waved you over, and so you know you're not going home now. Anyway,
yeah, right.
But Pete, I know you had mentioned offline that you had a couple of stories. I'd love to hear another.
Well, there's you know, not so much about playing, but more about how he loved drummers, you know, and how he was always kind to me when I was around, and it's sort of funny, you know, in the lead singer category, you know, like we were doing Glastonbury and we were on before them, and Elvis disappeared out of our dressing room, and you know, I sort of figured he was up to something, you know, like, and anyway, I went for a walk around backstage, and then one of our crew guys came running up to me and he goes, Pete, where have you been? Elvis is looking for you everywhere. I'm like, oh, you know, I'm just wandering around. And then Elvis came running up. He's like, Pete, follow me. I'm like, what's going on? So I followed him and we went to the Rolling Stones backstage area, like the sanctum, you know, with it's all black and there's the two security guards. And we walked in and the first room was a lot of flight cases, like wardrobe cases and stuff. And there's Charlie Watts just standing there. And so Elvis goes, you know, he's like, here's Pete. And I'm like, what? You know, and then Charlie Watts looks at me and then he looks back at Elvis and then he points at me and he says to Elvis, he's good, he is. and that single moment, like from then on, it doesn't matter what problems me and Elvis are having with an arrangement or anything, you know, it's like, well, you know, I mean, and apparently Elvis had gone in and he'd run into Charlie, and Charlie said to him, who's playing drums with you? And he said, it's Pete. And he said, well, where's Pete? and so And so Elvis, he was like, oh, I'll go get him, So he came out and found me, and and there's
Oh,
one
that's
other, I mean, that was like, and then I took a picture with him, and that is like my most treasured thing, and we still laugh about it, with Elvis. It's like, but there's one other thing though, when you were talking about the way him and Keith play and how it kind of moves around and everything. I was doing this session a little while ago, and the song sounded to me like bitch, like da 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 da. And I thought, I'm gonna go and listen to bitch, just to get some ideas and also to see what the tempo is. So I took my metronome, I got bitch on my computer, and I did the clicker on my metronome. I think it was like 130.
22, 130. Okay.
Yeah, it was something I can't remember, but what blew me away was it stayed in time. Like because it gets to the first verse, the first chorus, you're like, hang on a minute, we all know, like how, and then it just carried on. It's like, Jesus Christ, this is still, there's fills, there's things. It's weaving around, but it never got off the metronome until like maybe 3/4 of the way through, 2/3 of the way through. And it just sort of blew me away. It was like, wow, that is pretty great,
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Charlie, when you hear them play, according to what you just said, it almost sounds impossible, because when you hear them play, you hear them rush into the bridge. They do all the classic things that rock bands used to discuss, young bands, and go, you don't let it die here at we're going into the chorus, we gotta zoom up, and they do that. They do that sort of consciously, because they've known over the years, they've been told, and they've heard other bands do it wrong, like Lose the Energy and stuff. So they're doing it consciously, but it's so when you're listening, you're thinking, you can't help but notice it, especially if you're a musician like us guys who play on records and stuff, where we, every little detail of the time is scrutinized, so heavily. And you hear those guys playing, whether they're in the studio or playing live, they still do that. They rush up into the chorus, and then somehow it doesn't ever go away. There's no magic lost. In fact, it's more magical than ever. And then, like Pete just said, if you were to check it out, you'd probably find that it just was all, might as well have done it to a click, as far as the actual integrity of the time, the tempo. But that just points to the fact that there was magic when those guys found Charlie. They found their magic. They found the thing that created that engine that we now love so much. And it's the same thing with Ringo. When those guys found Ringo, they did everything in the world they could to keep him happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Ringo and Charlie, man, and two of the greatest rock bands ever. Amen. Completely different from each other, but the thing they had in common was they had two really special cats playing.
Amen.
And we're sitting here talking about them today.
Exactly, man. Absolutely. So, man, you guys are the best. And look at that. Look at John. Just a beautiful picture, man. That is amazing. So, you know what? John, I want to thank you for hosting this, man. And gentlemen, I want to, I can't thank you enough for allowing me to be in your company. Sincerely, from my heart, man. It's a huge, huge pleasure and a huge honor. And it's so great to see you all again. So, and John, thank you for having me, but I must bid you farewell. And I have to say ta-ta now. So
Okay, Vinny, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank
we
you.
So appreciate it.
Yeah.
Right, you guys.
Thoroughly
You
appreciate
guys take care of yourselves, man.
All right,
God bless you all.
Okay, Vinny.
Ciao,
Love you.
Ciao,
bello.
ciao. Okay.
Love you back.
Love you. See you, buddy. And guys, I won't keep you too much longer. I know we're getting on in time, but I did, just to Jim's point, I wanted to show this picture, and I thought
Oh, it's got a great shot.
it's a perfect segue for Jim. Maybe you could just take a second, and you and I spoke on the phone a couple of weeks ago, and I told you how I keep this in my drum room, and it gives me huge inspiration to see three of my biggest giant heroes together. And I know this was a special day for you and for all three of you guys.
Oh, that was the first time they had seen each other in so long. And it was really, it was one of those moments, you know, where I had to cry a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
But hey, you know what? It's too bad Vinny left. I wanted to ask him, you know, none of you guys are as old as I am. No, I'm finding out that nobody's as old as I am. Except Charley and Ringo, you know, and they're actually older than me, which is, you know, and I'm seriously, so one thing that is happening to me that I wanted to find out from any of you guys, because you're not this old yet, but maybe it's happening to you. The older I have gotten, the more I cry all the effing time, man. Like little things make me cry. Like I had, you know, our great grandkids were over the other day, and I had this conversation. I had this conversation with my great granddaughter, and she's just as smart as she can be. She's 16 years old, and she's like an advanced placement, whatever the hell that means, in school, and and math is her thing, and math was not my thing. I was telling her how proud I am that she didn't take after me.
Well, she did. Drumming is math. Drumming is incredible math.
Well, maybe,
right.
maybe you're right. Maybe there is something there in that little DNA thing with it. But I just found myself when she was talking to me and stuff, I was trying to not cry in front of her, but I couldn't help it. And
that's a beautiful thing.
Stuff like this it's just happening to me all the time now, you know. And so, like seeing Anton, man, Anton, I haven't seen you in so freaking long.
Yeah, man, it's good to see you.
I love our hangs, you know, in New York and all. And Pete, we used to hang out all the fucking time.
I know, we had a few adventures, yeah.
Right? And Aaron, I don't know you, Aaron, but now I do. And I can tell that you're a badass, wonderful cat, man. Very, you know, what I do love about our drumming community is it's a lot more soulful than I ever thought it was. And we're all, even though we're all completely different, coming from so many different worlds and stuff, we have this thing in common. And it just, like I said, it almost makes me want to cry, you know, talking about it, because it's a beautiful thing.
Well, and it's got a lot to do with Charlie Watts, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, on the bookshelf of rock and roll, if you took that stuff away, there'd be a big gap up there.
Amen, Pete. Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Just an unusual soul, an unusual, sweet-natured soul, man. And to hear you guys all talking about him like that it shows that he wasn't just that way around me. Obviously, I mean, that's who he was.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'll just say, you know, I've told people this, and without belaboring the whole thing, but you know, I would have been happy just to meet him. He was my childhood idol. I started playing drums after hearing Exile on Main Street, and it was like that. I didn't even really decide to be a drummer till I was listening to that record in 1972, and then I wanted to be a drummer, and I wanted to be Charlie. So when I met him 25 years later, I would have just been happy to shake his hand and say, "It's an honor to meet you, sir." You know, but we somehow, and I say somehow, but he liked me, and we became friends, and it's what we've all said. He was just such an amazing, soulful human that, like he just,
you know, I saw him do something that I've never seen anyone do on the Letterman show. We did like maybe 6,000 shows. I've never seen anyone do this. Especially in the early days, they would make people play with the band, with the Letterman band, which I was the beneficiary of, but I could totally understand it was putting people in certain positions that they may or may not have wanted to be in. Anyway, he came to the show, he was playing with his band, and he walked into the studio and they said to him, oh, by the way, you're going to be playing with the Letterman band today. And he said, what? He said, yeah, you're going to be playing with the Letterman band today. And he said, thank you, turned around, walked out, left the show.
I never heard that.
Him, you know? I thought it was great.
Yeah.
Did you ever tell him that, Anton? Did you ever like tell him?
I wish I had.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
so funny. He did come back later with his band and played. And they played What's New. I remember they played What's New. You know, the jazz standard.
Yeah, yeah. Oh
Yeah.
man, another great Charley story.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I'm going to let you guys all go, and I so appreciate your time today. But what I would love to do down the road, when everybody's watched Get Back, we could do like a little separate little hang.
Oh, yeah,
talk
that's
about
so
our
awesome.
friend.
That's that thing.
Yeah, yeah. Jim's just starting it, and I think Pete, you said you haven't started watching it yet.
No, my
Right.
daughter's just arrived. We're going to watch it this afternoon. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what?
yeah.
I would like to go and watch. I want to go and watch the old movie now, just to
original.
see.
Oh, yeah,
Because it's done in
movie.
a whole different way, left you with a different impression.
Yeah, yeah.
That's right.
I have a question for Jim Keltner that maybe you can answer if you remember this. And again, I'm pivoting off Charley for 1 minute, but he'll understand. It's a Ringo question. I've heard through the grapevine or that Ringo gifted you his old Paiste cymbals from that period or earlier, some 602s, that you have some hi-hats maybe, or maybe some other Ringo, or is that a
Where
secret?
did you hear that?
I don't know where I heard it, but I feel like I heard it somewhere that he. I'll just tell you this. Ringo told me years ago in a little funny way, as he he likes to do. I brought him some cymbals one time to an all-star gig, and he was trying out ride cymbals, and he turned to me and he said, something to the effect of, Paiste makes some pretty nice cymbals too, and and he kind of winked at me, and I said, yeah, I know they do. And but I had heard maybe from Jeff Jonas or someone that he had gifted you some of his old cymbals. But my point to that is, on the Get Back documentary, you're going to see a Paiste 602 20-inch medium ride.
Oh yeah, that I'm very familiar with that symbol. I used to, yeah, I saw that. I never see when I was early on in those days. I didn't like Paiste cymbals. I didn't like the idea of a Paiste cymbol.
Yeah.
Wow.
Zildjian was the shit. I mean, that was everybody's thing. I mean, that's what anybody played. I didn't know anything about Paiste cymbals, and but when I saw Ringo's set, he had that Paiste, and it sounded beautiful, and
Wow.
and I think that was the beginning of my having a little more respect for whoever they were. And then when they, and I honest to God do not remember how they came into my life and how that became a thing. But now I love them so much. They're like a huge part of my life, man. It's like DW, every time I say something to DW, Don goes and makes it, or just any kind of little idea, they'll make the freaking thing, and then because I mentioned it, I get to have the main one, and it's fantastic. And that's the same thing with the Paistes, I've mentioned just a few things about the symbol, this and that, like a size, a thing, a whatever, and within a week or so, I've got one. And I
That's
love
how you treat an endorser. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've just they've made my life unbelievable, because I love thin cymbals, and all my Zildjians that I ever played, I never could get them thin enough. And
yeah, you told me this. I remember.
Now they make them for me so thin, it's just and
That's great.
But
Well,
in any case, John, I hate to tell you that no, I think that's an inaccurate story. I don't.
Okay.
I never. Ringo is extremely generous, and he's he's been unbelievably generous to me in so many ways. But no, I don't have any of his symbols.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I asked that question. I just wanted to mention that Anton and Pete and Aaron will tell you that when I worked for Zildjian, I would do the same thing for them. I just.
Oh, let's get that straight. Hey, is this still is this like still a thing?
It's still a thing. So I'm going to just read. I want to read something Charley Drayton sent me. He had to go to sound check. Charlie's on tour with Bob Dylan right now, and
Right.
he had a little bit of a bad connection in his room, and it was time to go. And he just said, "Love to you for bringing us all together in this conversation. Charlie's brushstrokes are poetic and one of a kind. He provided something to feel, which is more beneficial to the soul than any set of youthful chops could ever muster. Charley lives on."
That's right.
Charley Drayton.
That's it.
Wow.
Yep.
Charley Drayton,
Yep.
also a bad son of a gun.
Bad son of a gun. But gentlemen, I want to thank you all so much for being here today. This is great. This is not live, so it's taped. I'll put it up on YouTube later, and I'll send you guys the link. And I hope you had fun. This has been. I'm going to pinch myself when I'm done doing this. So thank you guys so much.
Thanks for putting it together, man.
Oh, you're welcome, Anton. What were you going to say, Jim?
Yeah, it's an honor. It's an honor. Thanks.
Yeah, really nice to meet you, Aaron. These guys I know, all John and Anton and Pete, and I love them dearly. And now you're one of us. Okay, so welcome.
Thank you for all the inspiration. Just years ago, the only connection I had through somebody else was I was playing at the Greek Theater in LA. I think this was like '94, and my teacher in Dallas, who was Rick Latham, I studied with him when I was a kid.
Sure.
You had sent your regards through Rick to say hello to me, and that just made my life.
Wow.
So.
Oh yeah.
Thank
Well,
you.
you did it. You made us pay attention, man.
Well, thanks for everything, all of you guys.
I'm just going to warn the four of you guys. You might want to change your phone numbers and email addresses because I'm going to ask you to be on a future show with me by yourself, live from my drum room. So
Love you, Johnny.
Yeah.
We love you, bro.
Thank you, Jim. Love you guys.
All right.
All right, gentlemen. Well,
See you later.
hang tight for 1 second. I'm going to end the stream, and then I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. So thank you guys so much.
Okay.
Jim Keltner, Aaron Comis, Anton Fig, and Pete Thomas. Thanks, you guys.